professor of anthropology from Arkansas State University, and he earned his PhD from the University of Georgia in 2003 and has published a couple of books and 5 book chapters and a couple of books. And today his talk is on from the ancient South to the United States, pursuing a total history of early America.
Thank you. I'd like to thank everyone for coming to the talk and the professors for their hospitality and Oakland University for bringing me in to talk to me, or letting me talk to you. So thanks everyone for that. My name is Eric Bound. I received, as was just mentioned, I received my PhD from the University of Georgia in 2003. I pursue related archaeological and cultural research agendas. My archaeological work is aimed at developing a more complex and nuanced social history of the Mississippian world, while simultaneously increasing public awareness of native civilizations of Eastern North America. My cultural research agenda, which is primarily ethnohistorical in nature, is dominated by 2 overarching inquiries: the transformation of Native American societies in the 16th and 17th centuries as a result of the so-called Columbian Exchange, and the role of the Indian slave trade in shaping the geopolitics of Native North America. So these things sort of, they shape most of my research agenda. First and foremost, I am a student of the late Charles Hudson. He is one of the most important and influential scholars of Southeastern Indian ethnohistory in the last century. He was primarily interested in bridging the gap between prehistory and history, which is a difficult undertaking. He realized that by tracing the routes of the Spanish explorers of the 16th century who invaded the South, that he could reconstruct the social geography of the late Mississippian period. In other words, archaeologists are famous for applying names to past societies. We make these up. And in this case, what we're talking about is understanding how the people referred to themselves, what languages they spoke, what their political organization was like, who their allies were, who their enemies were, how large their territories were, etc. Things that are very difficult to pull out of just the material remains. This benchmark of the social geography of the late Mississippian period works as a benchmark. It allows us to move backwards in time so that we can better understand the dynamics of these Mississippian peoples. But it also allows us to move forward in time and to begin to understand some of the structural transformations that occurred in the early contact period. In pursuing his work, Hudson followed the annals paradigm, which developed by French social historian Fernand Braudel. This paradigm is composed of 3 broad aims. On the one hand, we're substituting the simple narrative of events for a problem-oriented analytical history. We are also focusing on the whole range of human activities, instead of concentrating mainly on classic history, which is political history, essentially. And then finally, there is an emphasis on collaborative and interdisciplinary approach to achieving these aims, in part because you need to use any and every possible source when you're trying to reconstruct what's going on at this very, very early period. The Annals School conceived of research as on historical time as parsing out along 3 levels of analysis. One was events, so we're thinking of things like wars, elections, an earthquake, the sorts of things you read about in the newspaper, your everyday kind of life. Then we also have the trends and cycles of history, so we're looking at things like social trends, we're looking at economic boom and bust cycles, we're looking at environmental pulses, and these trends and cycles play out at intervals that some people in society may understand these events, these trends, and to others they may be invisible, but they are certainly affecting everyone's lives, right? And then thirdly, we're looking at the structures of long duration. So here we're looking at things like kinship system, belief systems, geography and climate, which have tremendous impacts on societies. So the task of the researcher is to determine the events, the cycles, and the structures of the longue durée, as Brodel referred to it, for a people and a place, and then to see how they all fit together by finding the connections between them, or what Brodel referred to as the conjunctions between them. The result is what he called a total history, and which historical events can be explained and analyzed within a larger social and historical framework, and in turn can be used to understand the full and underlying structure of a given society at a given time. Hudson's reconstructions of the routes of Christian de Luna, Juan Pardo, and especially Hernando de Soto gave us this benchmark we needed to begin to flesh out the Mississippian world in ways that had been unimaginable before. Knights of Spain, Warriors of the Sun, Hernando de Soto and the South's Ancient Chiefdoms was published in 1997 by the University of Georgia Press, and this will remain the standard work on the subject into the foreseeable future. It also generated a tremendous amount of further scholarship, my scholarship included. Over time, Charlie developed a concept that he refers to as the Ancient South, which he found is complementary to a concept we're all familiar with, which is the Old South. This Ancient South developed during the Mississippian period, which lasted from about 1000 to 1700 CE. And at his suggestion, at Charlie's suggestion, the University of Georgia Press approached me about writing a book that would introduce the concept of the Ancient South and the complex civilizations that inhabited it to both the undergraduate student and to interested laypersons. The result of that work was this book published in 2013 by the University of Georgia Press, Mound Sites of the Ancient South, A Guide to the Mississippian Chiefdoms. And it is the first book of its kind dealing with this subject. It provides a description of Mississippian culture, and including information on subsistence and settlement practices, political and social organization, belief systems, etc. And it also deals with 22 archaeological sites that are accessible by the public, and they are discussed and placed within the context of the macro history of the region. These societies are unknown to most Americans, and what's going on is, you can see vaguely here, I'll show you some more pictures in a minute of archaeological sites, but what's going on are societies that are organized into chiefdoms. They have towns that have several thousand people in them that are walled. They're building large earthen mounds. They're creating works of art that are stunning in stone, in shell, in copper, and also in more perishable mediums. They are raising armies against each other. It is very unlike the regular conception of what Native American peoples are to the average American. And so getting these ideas into the mind of the general public, I think, is an important aspect. Among the sites visited, or among the sites discussed in this book, this is Cahokia. Here you can see a car to give you some understanding of the size of this monumental architecture. This is Monk's Mound. It is 100 feet tall at the fourth terrace at the top. It covers a very large area and was built one basket load of dirt at a time. It's quite a stunning accomplishment. And over here you see an artist's reconstruction of the city at its height, at which time it had anywhere from, scholars argue, between 10 and 30,000 people. This is a tremendously large town, and this would have been in the neighborhood of about 1,200. Okay. Some other sites. Here's another good example, Moundville, which is near Tuscaloosa, Alabama. You can see a large mound in the foreground and one in the background, and you can see mounds that circle this large open plaza area, which would have been used for a number of public celebrations and ceremonies, etc. And also Etowah, just to give you some idea of some of the artwork. We're looking here at stone. These are marble statues of a man and a woman. And here we have a common symbol we often refer to as a falcon warrior, where we're seeing someone who is sort of an anthropomorphized version of a bird of prey. But you can see many aspects of other animals. You can see the antlers on his head, the wings. You can see talons on the feet, tail feathers, and various aspects of jewelry and decoration that we find in graves. So very, very interesting stuff, and quite unlike what we generally conceive of as Native America. The early success of this book, which has been nominated now for 2 awards, the James A. Dietz Award from the Society for Historical Archaeology and the Fred Kiffin Book Award from the Pioneer American Society. This success has prompted my editors to consider the idea of a similar guidebook that deals with the early contact period. Some sites that would be included here: Mission San Luis in Tallahassee, Florida, where Franciscan missions and the Appalachian people lived together for about a century. There's lots to study here. Castillo de San Marcos, which is on the east coast of Florida, is another example. Fort Loudon, a reconstruction of which we see here, which is in Tennessee. So the book would deal with much of the early interaction between Euro-Americans and native peoples. Now, ultimately, what I would like to produce, over a decade ago, Charlie passed his course on to me, The Rise and Fall of Southeastern Chiefdoms, and he charged me with the task. This is when he retired, and he charged me with the task of writing a true social history of the ancient South, sort of an in-depth examination of the Mississippian world, which combined all 3 levels of historical analysis. He told me it might take me my career to write such a book, but that he expected it to be no less important to the field of Southeastern studies than his own seminal work, The Southeastern Indians, which was published in 1976. Now, this is quite a task to be handed, an intimidating one, but I hope to live up to it. I'm going to quickly move on. I was charged today with the task of explaining my research, where it comes from, where it's going, in a half an hour. And I have a pretty wide-ranging research interest, so this was quite a task. And I wasn't even finished. In pursuing this big task, I've used the work of Steve Lexon on the one hand and Tim Paucatat on the other as exemplary models. These are gentlemen who are doing very large histories of native North America, larger histories than archaeologists have previously been very comfortable with. Some are not too comfortable with these large histories now, but I think that there is a lot of potential to yield a number of valuable insights into the workings, particularly on a regional scale, of these early ancient civilizations of North America. So these are some of the works and some of the archaeologists that I'm working with and also use